must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
To you and a very good afternoon to you and good morning, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in. It's just a couple of minutes past 3 p.m. Here in Nairobi. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you the latest news from the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu. It is the 15th of November, 2021, and being a Monday, we do have so much in store for you today, and we shall start our bulletin with the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is traveling to Kenya for talks about the war in Ethiopia, as well as the security situation in Sudan and Somalia. President Uhuru Kenyatta recently visited Ethiopia, and the U.S. has warned it could impose sanctions on the Ethiopian government and the rebels in Tigray region. Mr. Blinken will continue his first official trip to Africa in Nigeria, where he is due to meet President Muhammadu Buhari. During his stay in the capital Abuja, he is expected to announce a new U.S.-Africa policy. Mr. Blinken's trip will conclude in Senegal, where he is to meet President Macky Sall, who is expected to take over the chairmanship of the African Union. And then you head over to Egypt, and archaeologists in Egypt say they've made one of the most important discoveries in decades. They have found one of the 4 lost sun temples built by the pharaohs while they were still alive in an attempt to turn themselves into living gods. It is believed that only 6 sun temples were built by the Egyptian pharaohs some 4,500 years ago. Just 2 of them have been unearthed so far. The archaeologists are describing the discovery of a 3rd such structure as the biggest find for 50 years. It stands in the Abu Ghurab site south of Cairo, and it would have featured a large courtyard with a tall obelisk inside it that was perfectly aligned with the east-west arc of the sun. And then we head over to Burkina Faso. At least 20 people have been killed in a militant attack in Burkina Faso's northern border region, the authorities have said. 19 of the victims are said to have been officers in the military police, and 1 was a civilian. The militants targeted an outpost near a gold mine in Inata. 2 days earlier, 7 police officers were killed in another attack in the region, which borders Mali and Niger. Islamist militants with links to Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State group operate in the frontier area. The 3 countries, backed by Chad and France, have deployed hundreds of troops there already. And then we go to South Africa, and the government in South Africa has withdrawn support for Miss South Africa and the Miss Universe contest to be held in Israel. There has been calls for Lalela Mswane to boycott the pageant, despite organizers saying it should not be politicized. Those opposing South Africa's participation in the contest are protesting against Israel's alleged committing of atrocities against Palestinians. South Africans say they know too well the politics of apartheid and are therefore not in support of what is going on in Israel. In a statement, South Africa's Arts and Culture Ministry said that atrocities committed by Israel against Palestinians are well documented and could not in good conscience associate itself with such. Israel has in the past denied committing atrocities and rejects accusations that its treatment of Palestinians amounts to apartheid. Minister Nati Nthua explains that Ms. Mswane's withdrawal could have been good for South Africa's global standing in comparison to one-off event that can prove disastrous to her future and public standing as a young black woman. The Miss Universe contest is set to be held on the 12th of December. And then you go to Nigeria, and the so-called Islamic State has confirmed that it carried out an attack in Nigeria that killed Brigadier General Zama Zirkusa and 3 other soldiers in an ambush in the West African branch of Islamic State known as ISWAP. It's reported the army unit was in its way to reinforce troops engaged in a fierce battle with insurgents. The military said the fighting erupted after ISWAP fighters drove into Askira town in 12 armored vehicles, burning down houses, shops and schools on Saturday. Islamists have waged a devastating insurgency in the country's northeast for more than a decade, and President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed his sadness at the deaths of the soldiers, saying they paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect fellow Nigerians from the terror. And we head over back to South Africa, and South Africa's last white president, F.W. de Klerk, who died at 85 years old last week, will be cremated in a private ceremony on Sunday. According to his foundation, de Klerk came to power in 1989 under apartheid, a system of legalized racism, but later became a key figure in the transition to democracy. In 1993, he shared the Nobel Peace Prize with former President Nelson Mandela for helping to negotiate an end to apartheid. His legacy, however, divides opinion in South Africa. He died on Thursday after having been diagnosed with cancer earlier in the year. And then we head over to Somalia now, where 5 Ugandan soldiers serving with the African Union troops in Somalia have been found guilty of killing 7 civilians in August. 2 of the soldiers have been sentenced to death, while 3 others have been given a 39-year prison sentence. The 3 will be repatriated to Uganda to serve their sentences there. The civilians were unlawfully killed during a gun battle in Golweyin between its troops and Al-Shabaab militants, the AU has said. The AU's AMISOM force has been in Somalia for 14 years. It has been fighting the Al-Shabaab Islamists who retain a stronghold in parts of the country. Almost a third of AMISOM's 20,000 troops are from Uganda, making it the biggest national contingent. Saturday's court-martial ruling by Uganda comes a month after the AU announced it wanted to expand its military operation in Somalia, pending approval from the UN and Somalia government. And then we head over to Ethiopia now. And the African Union Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, has warned that dialogue cannot deliver peace to Ethiopia with the war continues to intensify. While the war continues to intensify. Mr. Obasanjo's former president of Nigeria has recently returned from Ethiopia, where he held talks with the federal authorities and the Tigray's People Liberation Front, TPLF, who have been at war with each other for the last 1 year. Mr. Obasanjo said he remained hopeful about talks, but all sides needed to stop fighting and find some common ground. So far, they are wide apart. The Tigrayans say they cannot go to dialogue until the federal authorities allow aid into Tigray, where tens of thousands are on the brink of famine. The government says the Tigrayans must recognize its legitimacy and withdraw from the regions of Amara and Afar. There's the added complication of the 8 other groups who have just formed an alliance with the TPLF. And then we head over to Libya, and the son of Libya's late leader, Muammar al-Gaddafi, has registered as a candidate in the country's first direct presidential election next year. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi was once the heir apparent to his father, but his support for the brutal crackdown on protesters 10 years ago tarnished his image. Since that 2011 uprising, Libya has been driven by conflict. Rights groups have raised fears the vote scheduled for December 24th will not be free and fair. World powers and the United Nations Secretary General have warned that anyone who tries to obstruct it or falsify the outcome will face sanctions. Photos and videos circulating online show Saif al-Islam Gaddafi sitting in front of a poster for the upcoming poll signing electoral papers in the aftermath of Muammar Gaddafi's brutal end. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi was himself captured by a militia. He was held for 6 years, receiving a death sentence that was later overturned. Mr. Gaddafi is still wanted on war crimes charges by the International Criminal Court, but has gradually re-emerged onto the public stage. We head over to Sudan, and the authorities in Sudan killed at least 5 demonstrators on Saturday in a crackdown on anti-coup protests after the military tightened its grip by forming a new ruling council. The pro-democracy protest comes nearly 3 weeks after top General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan ousted the government, detained the civilian leadership, and declared a state of emergency. The Independent Central Committee for Sudanese Doctors said 3 of the deceased were killed in East Khartoum and 2 in Khartoum's twin city of Omdurman. According to the medics, 4 of the victims were shot dead, while 1 died from suffocation by tear gas. The latest deaths bring 20 to the number of people killed in anti-coup protests since the military takeover on October 25th, according to the medical records. And then we head over to the next Sudan, that is South Sudan, and the government is unable to prosecute corrupt officials for fear of rebellion. President Kiir's press secretary has said. The statement comes days after President Salva Kiir accused some of his former senior officials of siphoning off the country's resources. The unnamed officials, Kiir says, have opened personal bank accounts outside the country and have built skyscrapers and luxurious apartment complexes with money from the state coffers. Kiir over the weekend, revealed that he fired the Minister of Finance due to his failure to reveal the amount of money in the state coffers. Some members of the public and activists, often as leaders who are accused of corruption, are not arrested, charged or prosecuted. They say encourages leaders to keep up with embezzling the country's resources without being held accountable. When asked why those accused of corruption are not prosecuted, President Kiir's press secretary says the president fears those implicated in corruption scandal, when prosecuted, may take up arms against the government. According to investigations carried out by the commission over the past 2 years, more than $73 million has been diverted since 2018. Including transactions worth almost $39 million in a period of less than 2 months. The commission noted that this figure is only a fraction of the overall amount looted, as President Salva Kiir himself admitted as far as 2022. And 12, South Sudan's ruling elites have diverted more than $4 billion. $4 billion, all right? And last year, Transparency International ranked South Sudan as 3rd most corrupt country in the world. I'm not surprised. And then we head over to Eritrea, and the country is condemning fresh sanctions that were imposed on Friday by the United States on Eritrea's military ruling party and 2 senior government officials in connection with Eritrea's role in the Ethiopian conflict, asserting they continue Washington's misguided and hostile policy. Eritrea's foreign ministry lashed out Saturday and contended in a statement the goal of the illicit and immoral sanctions is to inflict a suffering on Eritreans' people and destabilize the Horn of Africa nation. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control announced on Friday that it had imposed sanctions on the Eritrean Defense Force, whose soldiers have fought in the Tigray region alongside Ethiopian forces, and Eritrea's sole political party, the People's Front and Democracy and Justice. Very well, and then we end our bulletin this afternoon from Cameroon, where schools and economic activities have completely shut down in Bamenda, an English-speaking city in western Cameroon, after police opened fire, killing an 8-year-old girl. Several hundred irate residents took to the streets protesting the killing, while armed separatists have launched attacks on government forces, calling on the military to leave Bamenda. Civilians shouted as Cameroonian troops shot in the air to stop people from protesting on Saturday along the streets of Bamenda, capital of Cameroon's restive English-speaking northwest region. Police said in a statement that residents are protesting the killing of an 8-year-old by a police officer, according to the statement signed by the Cameroon's police chief, Martin Barga Gwele. Police wanted to immobilize a suspected vehicle, and a bullet mistakenly hit and killed the 8-year-old. So that is the latest from the continent of Africa. We have to talk about South Sudan, and then we'll come to perhaps Nigeria, and then a bit of Ethiopia, and that move that South Africa has taken. But let's just talk about South Sudan very quickly. And the government fears to prosecute corrupt government officials because of fear that these government officials might take up arms and rise against the government. So it does not matter what they do, they will operate in impunity. When you look at these figures and the amounts that now we're being told is being lost through corruption in South Sudan, it is staggering. And to know something very important like the peace process has been stalled because the country is saying they do not have enough funds to fund the whole process. And then you're reading figures like $4 billion that cannot be accounted for. South Sudan is, I don't know what to say. This is unacceptable. this is unacceptable. Lack of funds is what has been used as an excuse as to why the whole process has stalled, as to why very important sections of the revitalized peace agreement cannot be implemented, lack of funds. And now you mean to tell me $4 billion cannot be accounted for, have been siphoned. And on top of that, that was in 2012. And in 2018, about $39 million in this period, in less than 2 months, was lost and was diverted and cannot be accounted for. And before that, there was 2 years prior to that, $73 million cannot be. Come on now. Somebody is joking there in South Sudan, and the government cannot take action because it fears that should it charge these government officials, then there will be a fear of retaliation. Perhaps they have their own militia somewhere in a village somewhere, so there will be increased rebellion. They are holding the government and the people of South Sudan at a ransom, if I might just put it like that. So this is unacceptable. President Salva Kiir is admitting that the government is unable to prosecute corrupt officials for fear of rebellion. This is unacceptable. So now what? They're just supposed to operate in impunity? And a couple of, I think, months ago, President Salva Kiir said that these officials have built even skyscrapers. I think I see some here in Nairobi, I'm not sure, and other places across the continent of Africa and others. And this money has been looted from state coffers. And apparently, on Friday, President Salva Kiir, fired the finance minister because he had asked to know, as the head of state, how much do we have in our national coffers? And the minister could not give a straight answer. He was refusing to tell the president how much money South Sudan has in its central bank. Does it have a central bank? I assume it does. But he was refusing to give the information to the president. Like, how dare you? So this minister was fired. Something is wrong with South Sudan. So I'm really not surprised that last year's Transparency International ranked South Sudan as the third. I don't know why they're saying third. I think it was the second, or this year's, it was the second most. Somalia is the first, then South Sudan. And that is because of the continued chaos and lack of proper structures and accountability. Now you understand why the stakeholders of this peace process in South Sudan, especially the politicians, will not agree for South Sudan to know peace, because if South Sudan knows peace, there will be better structures in place, there will be better, accountability in place, good governance and things like that. And they will not find a loophole to siphon money like they have been siphoning. Now, I do understand while they continue fueling the chaos in South Sudan, you would think that somebody from outside is the one that is instigating. Of course, there are outside factors. But now when you read, information like this, it tells you it is an inside job, much part of it, and they will not want South Sudan to stabilize, because that will mean that they can steal. That will mean that, they will have proper structures, proper accountability, proper, everything. And they can't allow that to happen. And that's why they'll continue fueling these wars. I was telling you about, 2 or 3 months ago, there's a report that was presented to the United Nations Security Council that said that even the recent conflict in South Sudan has been sponsored by some government officials. Now it makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense, so that they can continue plundering the country. They can continue stealing and then investing in other countries. I think Kenya has been accused, in the recent past, and I think there's a story that I read in one of the papers, and other countries. I think even us in this region, as we continue, because we know Kenya has been a huge supporter of the peace process in South Sudan, but now we have to step up and ensure no illicit money finds its way in this country. No money that belongs to the people of South Sudan and to the country of South Sudan finds itself in this country illegally, because this is unacceptable. $4 billion cannot be accounted for just a few months. and then add another 39 million US dollars, and then add another 73 million US dollars. And then you mean to tell us that you're broke and you cannot sponsor your own peace process. You're telling us that you're broke. You can't even have your people taken back to their villages. They're still languishing in poverty in these refugee camps. This is nonsense. And then to add on top of that, the government is saying it cannot prosecute these officials because there are fears of rebellion. Apparently, if you prosecuted these corrupt officials, they might start other wars. I guess they have their own militias in that country. We know South Sudan, everybody have their militia to fight their wars. You wonder if these militias even get to benefit from this corruption and what is happening. So should they be implicated in this corruption? Should they be held accountable? Then that means that it might complicate the peace process. So now we're just going to let them loot. We're just going to let them steal and not hold them accountable. What country is this, really? What country is this? You know very well this person is stealing, and you cannot do anything about it. Because why? You're afraid that you can prove that they have stolen from the public coffers. The Minister of Finance refuses to divulge information about how much the country has in its store to the president, to the head of state. This is nonsense. South Sudan, I don't know. The year is quickly coming to an end. We're hoping by right now they would have something tangible in terms of how much progress they've made when it comes to the implementation of the 2018 Revitalized Peace Agreement. There's nothing much to show for. They're busy looting their own country. And then we have to shoulder the burden of having refugees in Kenya, in Uganda, across the whole continent of Africa, and indeed across the world. We have to shoulder that. Countries have to sacrifice giving you money, like the US, the leading donor, in South Sudan. Come on now, you have got to do better. You have got to do better, President Salva Kiir, and you cannot be that helpless. You can't say that in South Sudan people just operate in impunity and then nothing will be done to them. What country is this, really? All right, so it's quite unfortunate what this reports from South Sudan. They can't prosecute those implicated in corruption scandal because should they be prosecuted, they might take up arms against the government. What? I know we have very crazy scenarios in this continent. This one of South Sudan, I cannot. So the people of South Sudan will continue suffering because we have a leadership that has refused to do right by its people. Because we have a leadership. We have, a gang of politicians who act like criminals, and they cannot be held accountable because they'll come back and terrorize the people. Because if they hold arms against the government, who will suffer? The same people in South Sudan who have been suffering now for 10 years plus. So this is just sad. I am appalled. I am annoyed. I don't know how to feel about South Sudan. And South Sudan is very close to my heart for some reason I can't explain, because we've seen, and Kenya, we've been part of this process. We've helped mediate. We've supported South Sudan. Even for them to become independent, and when they were still a very young nation, they still are. All right, so we sort of have a stake, and all we want is for South Sudan to stabilize. And the rest of the world who have sacrificed, who have supported. But it appears the rest of the world wants a peaceful South Sudan more than the leadership. I'll not say the people because I think the people of South Sudan want peace. They've suffered enough. But the leaders who are supposed to midwife that and make that happen and make that a reality to the people of South Sudan, this is what they're doing, just stealing with impunity. And nobody can speak. Otherwise, they'll take up arms and rise against the government. All right. South Sudan is complex. I'll just leave that. Yeah, Apo Kaliab, you're saying merciless leaders are God. Wani, thank you so much. You're saying it is an unfortunate message from South Sudan's government, and that will encourage bad actors to steal until South Sudanese unite and remove them. I wish there's a possibility that could happen, because as long as they continue being there, they have proved time and time again, they don't mean well for the people of South Sudan. No change will come with the current leadership we have in South Sudan. We will continue. It will be a cycle. It will be a cycle of poverty. It will be a cycle of suffering. It will be a cycle of these people continue stealing from the country that does not even have enough. Like, how do you steal a whole $4 billion US dollars from South Sudan? And it needs that money. Have you seen the state of the hospitals? Have you seen the state of the schools in South Sudan? This is ridiculous. This is absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And I'm appalled. I'm really, really annoyed by the leaders there in South Sudan. I can't even tell you. All right. Nelson Waller, thank you so much. I can't with South Sudan. Like, enough is enough. And that is what other supporters and other stakeholders who have been supporting the peace process, who have been supporting, the people of South Sudan. It will come to a point the rest of the world will say enough is enough. We're going to help you until when? When are you going to do right by your own people? We're going to hold your hand until when? They have to show some level of leadership, and for President Salva Kiir's office now to come, where you think there will be some semblance of leadership now is telling us, we can't really prosecute these people unless, lest they take up arms against the government. So you are basically telling us you're having criminals as part of the government, because these are government officials who are siphoning this money from public coffers. So you have a gang of criminals pretending to lead a country and ensuring that the country is in a perennial crisis time and time. If it's not, is it Tumbara, where I can't remember the name of that place? There's a report that said government officials actually sponsored that conflict. They will not allow for peace to be, for stability to return to South Sudan, because they need a chaotic situation that allows them to continue stealing, because there are no structures of accountability. It is unfortunate and very sad indeed that the general public, the general South Sudan, very innocent men and women and children, still languish in those refugee camps. Have you seen the state in which these people live? President Salva Kiir, how do you sleep at night? And the leaders in South Sudan, how do you sleep at night knowing your people have not known dignity for a very long time? Children are dying, overtreatable, diseases. People cannot go back to their villages because security cannot be guaranteed. All right, and you're telling us what? The people who are stealing the money of these people cannot be held accountable? Come on now, you've got to be serious. This is unacceptable. So I don't know what will happen there. Okay, so as we speak, South Africa has decided to withdraw its support for Miss South Africa, who is supposed to be contesting in Miss Universe contest that is scheduled to be happening in Israel on the 12th of December. We know that South Africa and I think Malawi and another country were leading countries from SUDAN against. They were not very happy that Israel was admitted as one of the observer countries by the African Union. And I think we talked about this at around in August, I think, this year. So now South Africa has decided to make a political statement in this, and they're saying that, they oppose what they call as apartheid, what Israel is doing against the people of Palestine. And Israel has in the past denied committing atrocities and rejects accusation that its treatment of Palestinians amounts to apartheid. And so South Africa said, no, we will not send our contestant there to contest in this Miss Universe because we are standing with the people of Palestine. Now, as I told you there, in August 2021, this year, SUDAN members met, and after they met, they say they were united in opposing the admission of Israel into African Union as an observer state, and the Southern African Development Community, that is SADC, accused the AU Commission headed by Chadian, diplomat Musa Faki Mohammed of unilaterally deciding to readmit Israel. And they're saying, Mohammed did not care to consult all the 55 members. But as we speak right now, Israel enjoys diplomatic relations with 46 out of the 55 AU members. So that means even some of the SADC members here support and have a diplomatic relationship with Israel itself. SADC members have 16. There are 16 members in SADC. So if you're saying Israel enjoys 46 diplomatic relations, 46 countries out of the 55, that means only 9 are left out. All right, so that means even some members in SADC have that diplomatic relation with Israel. So did all SADC members really agree to sever ties or to stand with the people of Palestine or to take sides? I'm not sure. But, when they met during the 41st Ordinary Summit of the Heads of State in August, it's just part of the, communication that was given, say that the summit expressed concern and objected the unilateral decision taken by the African Union Commission to grant the State of Israel observer status to the African Union. And so, of course, that summit was being held in Lilongwe in the capital of Malawi. We know that Malawian President Lazarus Chakwera right now is the chairperson of SADC, and Namibia and South Africa have gone on to push for the matter to be discussed at the regional level, with the SADC meeting that ended up in Malawi and making that communication. It was unclear whether AU could rescind the decision. However, as many other countries on the continent remained largely neutral on the issue so far. So we've not heard any of this matter going any further, and we've not heard anybody talking about it or other countries joining in opposing the readmission of Israel in the African Union as an observer state. So observer status is allowed to non-members like Israel to participate in certain activities of the African Union. Although it cannot have a vote on matters, it may nonetheless allow the country's diplomats to lobby or favorable policies at the General Assembly. Israeli leaders could also be granted opportunities to address African Union summits. Earlier this month, in August, Botswana expressed its dissatisfaction with the AU's move. So we've seen SADC, countries have a problem with that. So now South Africa has withdrawn its Miss South Africa in participating in this in Miss Universe. I don't know, do you think in such events it's okay to take political stance when it comes to sports? We've seen that happen a lot, and now this beauty contest. Who would have thought? Okay, are they denying this young lady an opportunity, to win, or is it right for South Africa as a country to take this political stand on issues that has nothing with politics? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and if at all, this was an okay move by, South Africa to take. Okay, keep writing. I'll read some of your messages very shortly. So we know over the weekend, before we get into the Ethiopian matter, and I'll let you know why Ethiopia matters in the bigger scheme of things, and my time is quickly running out. There were some killings that happened in Nigeria over the weekend, and an army general died together with other soldiers, and now the Islamic State, or ISWAP, in Nigeria, has taken responsibility over the killings. And yet again, President Buhari has tweeted. Did he tweet? Because Twitter right now is banned in Nigeria, but he gave out a communication, and he said that he's really saddened, because these soldiers died while protecting the lives of Nigerians from terror, and they paid the ultimate price, and the soldiers and the people of Nigeria will continue paying the ultimate price, because we do also have now a leadership in Nigeria which has allowed for terror to thrive in its own soil, has created a very fertile ground where, activities like this, could just, have skyrocketed, and the insecurity in Nigeria has skyrocketed, and there has never been a time that Nigeria has been very, insecure as it is right now under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari. And so the so-called Islamic State confirmed that it carried out the attack in Nigeria that killed Brigadier General Zarma Zirkusu and 3 other soldiers in an ambush in the West African branch of Islamic State, also known as ISWAP. It reported the army unit was on its way to reinforce troops engaged in fierce battle within sight, and then, they had 12 armored vehicles, and they came. How does an insurgent have 12 armored vehicles? Who is giving them these 12 armored vehicles? As they run through the cities and towns, do we not have security operators, even with the slightest of intelligence, to know that we have spotted or we have seen some armored vehicles someplace, but they're not for our own military, they're not for our security agents? So these criminals, these insurgents, these terrorists, they had 12 armored vehicles, and they ran through burning houses, shops, and schools. Like, what country is this? What country have you heard in this continent where things like this happen, where insecurity of this magnitude, unless in a failed state like Somalia? I mean, that is a different case. But in the most populous country in the continent that has a government and, a security a detail, and the army and the police and everybody else in that tier, have you heard things like this happen? And things like this have been normalized, and the people of Nigeria, in other parts of Nigeria, who feel they are safe and immune from whatever is happening in that other part of the country, have become complacent and refused to ask the government to be accountable, to ensure they are safe, to, What country have you heard in this continent? What country have you heard that, a whole, insurgent group will drive around in a convoy of 12 armored vehicles, burning down houses, shops, and schools? Like, there's no government apparatus in these areas. All right, so they killed. And President Buhari now expressed his sadness and over the death of the soldiers, saying they paid the ultimate price. This is something else that, just baffles me time and time again. I'm sure if I come back here tomorrow, there will be another unfortunate attack. There will be another banditry attack. There will be another kidnapping that has taken place in Nigeria that has been allowed to thrive. And it has become a mega million industry in Nigeria, kidnapping and other insecurity related, activities in that country. So he said he's sad. And that's all, he's been able to do. He's been having meetings upon meetings with his security members, heads of security in the country, but nothing forthcoming has been registered from this meeting. So I don't know until when will we continue seeing these senseless killings, these senseless activities happen in Nigeria, and no action is taken at all. And as we speak, the African Union Special Envoy for Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, from Nigeria, the former head of state, is now warning that a dialogue cannot be delivered in Ethiopia if the war continues to intensify. We've seen how that has worked out, and we know that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, U.S., is on his way to Nairobi. After that, he'll be headed to Nigeria, and then he'll end his visit in Africa, in Senegal. And so we are waiting for him to come, and I think the insecurity in Nigeria and this other part in the Horn of Africa, in West Africa, in the Horn of Africa, I think that could form part of his the things that he will be talking about. So as we speak right now in Ethiopia, things are getting worse by the day, and Obasanjo there is saying everybody has to agree to come to the table, and there has to be a ceasefire before any meaningful talk can happen. And Obasanjo, a former president of Nigeria, recently returned from Ethiopia, where he held talks with the federal authorities and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, who have been at war with each other for over a year now. So Obasanjo said he remained hopeful about possible talks, but all sides needed to stop fighting and find some common ground. I don't know how that is going to work out because we've seen that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is really not interested in talks. TPLF itself is not really interested in talks, and there's been a blockade, and no aid can go to the Tigrayan side, and the people there are really suffering, and then going through very tough famine conditions and other humanitarian-related, crisis that is happening there. And I don't know if a passenger will be able to deliver, but he's saying there has to be a ceasefire if anything meaningful in terms of talks and development should take place in Ethiopia. So we shall be looking to see how that will work out there in the next couple of days, and if at all the visit of Anthony Blinken will make any difference. So we shall continue with the rest of the conversation tomorrow. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Let me just read two of your comments and then I'll just call it a day. Hagwat, you're saying the Islamic Caliphate is coming to North Sudan in less than a year. Really? How do you know that? Do you have the intelligence report that President Buhari does not know and perhaps needs? And Paul Eziema, you're saying Nigerian government sponsoring a terrorist took. You're saying you're watching from Melbourne, Australia. And Nama Chukoma, you're saying we stand with the state of Israel. Okay, all right. I see you also taking sides in that war, the side that South Africa has taken in support of Palestine, and they're saying that Beauty Queen will not be attending the Miss Universe pageant in December that is meant to be happening in Israel. And James Bitoro, thank you so much for your time. You're saying Kenya has played a positive role in South Sudan, and for that we appreciate the Kenyan government and Kenyan people. And you know what? It is a pleasure, but I hope and I wish and I pray that the leadership of South Sudan will get their act together. I know that hope is really far-fetched because these people don't really care so much about the people of South Sudan. But I'm just praying for a day that there will be a new dawn in South Sudan. Otherwise, everything that is happening in that country is just not right. And everything that is happening in another Anglophone story that I've read to you here, where an 8-year-old was shot by a police officer, it's not right. And other countries, okay? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you here tomorrow, God willing. I appreciate your time. My name is Miriam Ugote. Bye-bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.